Transforming overwhelm. Transforming overwhelm. Another word for overwhelm is chaos. And what we do is we transform it into play. So let's explore this journey. So many things can overwhelm us in life. Our responsibilities, our families, our work, our mind, our wounds, grief, our loss, suffering. So many things can overwhelm us. Time, just being in a body, just being in this world is sometimes overwhelming. And some of us are more apt to be overwhelmed than others. What it is it's the raw energy of chaos. And chaos is, the ancient alchemists, medieval alchemists, they call it the massa confusa, the chaos of the elements, the very beginning of the world. So they say that the world began from the swirling of the elements, which actually is kind of true. And we can apply that in a way to our lives. Because sometimes, we feel like everything's just in a swirl and we can't find any coherence and we can't find any peace and we can't even find a breath for ourselves. And that's so challenging. So how do we transform that? Well, the first thing is to understand that it's a pregnant state, and that there is something, it's like all these shadows. There's something in it for us if we have the courage to dig a little deeper into the pattern. If we are simply adrift on the waves, a victim of it, then it's very difficult for us to separate ourselves from that feeling of overwhelm. And therefore, it's very difficult and challenging for us to unlock its benefits, its potential secrets. Because the essence of these teachings are that every shadow contains a gift. Every difficult state is actually a launch pad for an awakening inside us. Overwhelm being one. So think about a child. The child swims in the currents of chaos, and yet they're not overwhelmed. And when I say chaos, I mean that they have no rhythmic pattern imposed from the outside. I mean, we as parents, whatever, impose our patterns, but the child just moves randomly, spontaneously. If you watch a child at play, you'll see that they just pick things up, they throw them down, they put them in their mouth, they chuck them, they don't care about where it ends up. They're just on to the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. And there's a real beauty to that. And yet as adults, obviously we learn that we can't live like that. And yet, internally, it's possible that we can. Externally, we would create chaos. But internally, there's something inside us that yearns for that state of innocence again, that state of freedom. And that state of freedom is not so far from the overwhelm. You could kind of see like this, it's just too much. But then if there's just the smallest shift inside us, then we wouldn't experience it as overwhelm. We might experience it as adventure or play. But how do we make that shift? One way is we have to breathe. We have to learn to breathe, because breathing is the one way in which we can create pauses between the thoughts, between the kind of ripples of anxiety, between the fear that lies underneath overwhelm, because underneath overwhelm lies fear. It's the fear that we are not in control, that we cannot be in control, that we've lost control. It's the fear that almost we don't exist, that we're falling away into non-existence. So how do we bring ourself back into the frame? Not to regain control, but to regain some stability. And the first thing is we breathe. And we pause, we create pauses. This is one of the central teachings of my path, is to create pauses in your life. Rest, little rests, little places where you can actually look at things as they are, instead of just spinning from one thing to the next, spinning, overwhelmed by life, overwhelmed by emotion, overwhelmed by your sensitivities to the environment, to others, to what's going on, unable to cope. So first thing is pauses, little cups of tea, A cup of tea can be like a few moments, just a little moment, just to entertain like the possibility of, a moment of peace. I actually have it within my ability to create little islands of peace within my day. But I have to make them. I have to make space for them. So it just can be like, put your feet up on the sofa and just 3 deep breaths. That's such a great practice. 3 deep breaths. If you remember that throughout your day will soon be very different. 3 deep breaths. And a sigh. Whenever you feel overwhelmed, make that a practice. And the more you do that, such a simple thing, the more you will begin to realize that there are more and more pauses and spaces in your busy day. And it's up to you to create them. Because 3 breaths, how long does that take? Less than a minute? Less than a minute? Can you not give yourself that minute in the middle of a task, at the end of a task, before you move to the next task? And how often can you do that? Those 3 deep breaths. You can set your clock to remind you, every hour, 3 deep breaths. Every half an hour, whatever it is, put it on your mirror, put it on your thing. 3 deep breaths above the washing up. Just write it. Wherever you create it. There's no one that can't do that. And soon you'll see that this very simple approach begins to open up your life, your inner life. And you begin to realize that actually you're not out of control, because you're dictating the rhythm now. Because you just said everything else stops. Everything. Even the child screaming, 3 deep breaths. The child will be fine for 3 deep breaths. And then you can approach. And you will approach in a different spirit, having had those 3 deep breaths. You will approach in a different way. More measured, more calm, more centered, more clear. You can change your entire life just through this. Your entire life. It could be entirely different from how it is now. Just with this very, very simple technique. So I offer it to you today. And what you'll see is then your life becomes to be more of a play again. Because when you're not overwhelmed, you can respond to things in a playful way. You can, even difficult things, even painful things, even difficult relationship patterns. 3 deep breaths gives you that moment of space that probably prevents you from saying the thing that would have caused even more pain, or thinking it even. Like 3 deep breaths clears the mind, just momentarily. and then the mind comes back in. But it gives that little bit of space so that you reframe the way you're seeing something, and you can reframe it in a much more positive light. And the more positive you feel in the way you think, in the way you look at people, in the way you talk about people, the more positivity you can bring, not false positivity, just kindness, then the better you will feel about yourself. And the better you will feel about life, and the more joy you will begin to feel, and the more happiness, and the more playful you can be. And then you can begin to smile, and you can begin to laugh. And then even when things get completely overwhelming, you're not overwhelmed, because the heart cannot be overwhelmed. An open heart cannot be overwhelmed. The mind can be overwhelmed, but not the heart. The body can be overwhelmed, but not the heart. It's not possible for the heart to be overwhelmed. Not the true heart, because it just goes on opening. There's no limits to the extent of the love that the heart and the joy that the heart can take in, transform, and feel. So make that the core of your practice, this simple practice of 3 deep breaths, and open your heart and bring it back to life, and then bring it into all the different corners of your life. 3 deep breaths.